Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Sully, and I'm one of the operational directors within Robert Half's London business. So I'll probably start this off like a bit of a wedding speech, actually, with a few thank yous. So thank you, as I said, to everyone for attending today. I know that even though we're working in this way, attending these webinars in amongst all of the other conference calls is tricky. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone that's come back, everyone that's given us business in the past, everyone that's currently working with us, because believe it or not, we're fully operational and still making placements, just to drop that in there. And thank you to everyone that plans on coming back to us and recruiting through us in the future. It's probably one of the most overused phrases at the minute, but these are certainly unprecedented times. And what today's webinar will try and do is give us a bit of support in looking and reimagining what the future of work looks like. Because I think it's really important in these times that we all collaborate and work with one another and help one another to get through this. So that's hopefully what we'll try and do today. We're going to do something slightly different as well today. So those of you who are dialing in and I'm returning to the webinars will notice that my role has very much been to bookend the wonderful Katie Tanner and introduce her and then wrap up into the Q&A at the end. But seems very appropriate that we're looking at the future of work for me to help and co-host today. Three main reasons for that. My boss won't like this very much, but these webinars have actually been the highlight of my week. We've been doing them sort of twice a week now for the last 7 weeks. And it's really given me a sense of purpose and really helped me feel like I've been giving something back to clients at a time when we know that talking through job descriptions and putting bums on seats isn't the priority at the minute. Secondly, I'm very much an operational director, as I said, so I'm still speaking to candidates and clients on a daily basis. So I'm probably quite close to, in the dialogue that we're having outside of hiring at the minute, quite close to some real life examples that'll help us understand where we're going in the future. And then lastly, and I think what COVID has taught me is that we've all on a daily basis in some way, shape or form had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I've never done a webinar before, so I can vouch for the fact that it is quite uncomfortable, quite daunting. But I think all of this will tie in nicely to what Katie's going to talk about around leadership agility and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, like I said. One last point to note as well, I suppose, again, continuing the theme of doing something quite different. We've taken your feedback on board from previous webinars, and I know it can be quite daunting sort of logging in and speaking to ask a question. So what we're going to do today, if you look at the bottom of the Zoom page, there's a Q&A tab there. As we're talking today, if anything sort of pricks a question that you want to ask, type it in the Q&A tab and our wonderful assistant, Mr. Matt Robinson, will collate those questions and we'll run through them at the end. Just to let you know from a logistics perspective as well, when we start the Q&A session, just to protect sensitivity, we'll switch the recording off. But up until that point, everything's recorded and everyone will get a copy of the recording. So as I said, my wonderful co-host, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce her again, but we've got Katie Tanner. She's one of Robert Half's very own. Katie's role is as a director within our leadership and development team. Katie's role spans the whole of Robert Half's international zone, which is every country outside of the US where we have an operation. Katie's role is to support our managing directors and directors with their personal brands and professional brands. Katie's been with the business for nearly 20 years now, 17 of which were very much operational, like myself, so very close to clients and candidates, many different lines of business. I've had the great pleasure of working with Katie for 12 years within Robert Half myself, so I can vouch for the fact that you're in for an absolute treat today. Katie's passion for people and doing this sort of thing can be traced back to her pre-Robert Half days. Katie's got a BSc in psychology, and I only learned this through this process, but Katie was actually training to be a clinical psychologist prior to Robert Half. So quite befitting that she's on these webinars today. In terms of what gives her passion, joy and excitement, it's absolutely Katie's three lovely kids. So without further ado, over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Steve. So welcome everyone. It's great to see, as the numbers are coming up, some old names that I recognise, and equally lovely to see some new names. And as Steve said, we really appreciate you carving out the time to join us today. We know how busy everyone's lives are. So what we're hoping to explore today in this webinar is really look at the uncertainties we're all experiencing from the pandemic, whether that be the twists and turns in the economy that we're all facing, the changes to our workforces, our teams, and also the technology that we've all had to become very good at. If you think of it, we've got all of this coming at us in very different directions. So, but I would argue that for many of us, the toughish leadership challenge is in front of us. And what I mean by that is, how do we bring back a business in this new world? How do we bring back a business in an environment where we've got to coexist with COVID-19 without having a vaccine? So as a result, all of us, for our own teams, our businesses, our organizations, are going to need to take the time to really imagine what the future will look like. And we're going to explore that today, specifically through three lenses. We're going to look at people, we're going to look at process, and we're going to look at technology. And although we don't have all the answers, I guess no one does, what we hope to share is some of our own experiences, our own insights, and some of those that we've observed in our clients and candidates that we serve. But the reality is, I guess, that life is a constant readjustment to one's surroundings. And I guess that couldn't be a more truer statement right now. So I think that need in our leadership approach for flexibility, agility, balance is going to be absolutely key. And by us exploring those today and looking at what those look like for you, and maybe the leaders that you have that you're responsible for, we should hopefully see how we can build businesses with sustainability, but also overall business health. So the first thing we're going to look at is really thinking about how these processes, people and technology kind of all dovetail each other, really. They're all interdependent on one another. But you'll see the quote on the screen, who's from a guy called Colin Mooney. He's our Chief Digital Officer. And we were in a meeting back in May last year when he presented to us basically some research that was highlighting the technologies that business experts and leaders potentially identified as being the most disruptive to the workplace in the next 5 years. And little did he know how quickly the future would arrive. But I think when you read that quote, it really talks about the fact that the future of work is going to be very much down to the people, not just the technology. So I guess what he was really describing was that despite the monumental effort and momentum that's gone into artificial intelligence, automation and cloud computing over the years, it's crystal clear that even how advanced technology has become, it can't replicate alone what it would do with humans. So it still takes a human to react to these uncertain times, to respond and really create what the future looks like. And I think if you look at the current pandemic and the crisis we're in, I think again that has never been more a true statement. So you could argue today we find ourselves in an accelerated state of the future. And I guess in response to that, leaders are having to navigate and charter uncharted waters like they never have before. And more than ever, they're relying on data, business algorithms, looking at previous economic downturns and what learnings we can take from there to really help identify what solutions we should take to the challenges that are in front of us. And the reality is that's taking a lot of innovation. It's taking a lot of teamwork. You know, never has a cohesive team been more important, and reimagination to not only return, but to really try and take away some of the torment that the virus has inflicted on all of our businesses. And as I said earlier, we all know now that pretty much what was is no longer going to be. So we need to take our businesses by the scruff of the neck and really make the best of what we have without knowing for certain what is actually going to happen. So to Steve's point that he said earlier, as leaders, we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We are now having to make decisions without the full picture. We have to handle risk and mitigate risk like we never have before. The uncertainty and our leadership ability to deal with uncertainty is going to become an increasingly more important leadership skill. And I'm going to use a little example of a local producer where I live, local producer of ice creams, who prior to COVID would have been supplying local cinemas, sporting events, concerts. They kind of put leaflets in around local homes, and obviously their business, they had to rethink overnight, and they've completely innovated, pretty much set up an online delivery service, which, for a small family run business would have been no small feat. No doubt they would have had to have, hired someone to come in and help them get online and become an e-commerce business. And to me, what it highlighted was during this crisis, businesses have probably worked faster and better than they ever have dreamed of. Maintaining this urgency, this intensity and agility, we believe is key as we move forward. And I guess the key question to ask ourselves is, how sustainable is this? How sustainable is this performance? If you think about your own businesses now, how quickly have you had to adapt? And maybe you've, produced products, you've changed processes in times that, in a time frame that you probably would have not achieved before. So there are some silver linings. There are some great opportunities out there. So I guess we can't not ignore, though, the people behind that technology, as I said earlier, the people that will have the critical thinking, the thinking behind those processes, the agility to adapt, knowing when to push and also know when to pause. And as we reimagine and redefine the landscape moving forward, humans are going to be at the absolute core of any organization, as they were prior to the virus, and they certainly will be in the future. And you could argue, McKinsey, who, I was reading an article last week, they were looking at now is the perfect time to potentially rethink our operating models on how people work at their best. They took their sales teams, who are now all working remotely, who previously would have been in an office environment, pretty much like Robert Half, and they have seen a 29% uptick in effective sales than their traditional models. So, there could be, as I said, some silver linings, the opportunity to potentially break some archaic habits and find new, better ways of working that potentially, if we hadn't have had the pandemic, we might not have explored. So I guess as a leader, we all now need to widen our lens, widen our perspective, look left, right, and front, because we need to take that holistic approach. We can't just deal with what is in front of us. We need to be looking forward so we can get our businesses ready, our people ready, so we are absolutely match fit. We're able to rebound quicker, and that is what all of the research would tell us. That's what's going to give you the competitive advantage. And if you do this, you'll be positioning yourself from a point of strength. What I kind of want to talk about now is really the interdependency of these three lenses, and your understanding of how they work in your business, your understanding of which ones you need to push and pause are going to be really important. And the three lenses, as I've said, are people, process, and technology. And McKinsey would tell us that if we examine everyone's needs, if we examine our processes internally, and we leverage our technology that we've all no doubt invested in massively during the last 7 weeks, if not previously, we will maximize productivity and engagement overall. And if we look at our own internal Robert Half's journey over the last 7 weeks, it's unbelievable what we've achieved. For us, probably decades, we've grown accustomed to all working together in an office. We have over 350 global locations, and pretty much within 3-4 days, we made the transition for everyone to work from home. And that's pretty much is lifting and shifting 20,000 people. It's phenomenal. And, you know, not only have they integrated new technology, they've had to get used to working at home, potentially homeschooling children with their partners, their spouses. And we've also had to get used to leading our people remotely, and that takes a very different skill set, and really having to put the personal needs of our teams first and foremost, as well as the practical needs for sustaining a business. Then if we turn to technology, if you look at if we turn to process, if you think about all the different processes that we will have within our relevant businesses, we have all had to adapt those. And again, a great example of that would be our own redeployment of portable laptops for some of our temporary and permanent workers. You know, we've put lots of processes in place to really help and aid our temporary and permanent workers to still work. You know, some people don't have laptops, they might not have a secure cloud system, and we have something called AWS that's been able to help with that. But also a lot of families are sharing laptops. So we found by looking at our own internal processes, we've been able to deliver to our clients and candidates and get a competitive advantage over our competitors. I guess it would probably be very cliched to say that the crisis has accelerated anyone's shift to a digital world, and the best companies already had those in place probably, and are going that one step further now by enhancing and expanding their digital footprint or their digital channels. And, you know, we are no different. You know, we've obviously allowed everyone and got everyone up and working from home. We've reintroduced Teams. We've got something called AWS. We have an online platform that we're connecting with our clients, and something called Interview. It's been an absolute overwhelming pace that we've got this up and running. And it's meant that we can still deliver a high level of service to our clients and candidates. And I would encourage you, whilst you're listening, to think about what have you put in place in your businesses, in your teams, because no doubt you would have put things in place around people, process and technology. And it's really about now taking advantage of those. So if we all take a step back, if we all think about our own teams, our own organizations, we all have to accept that what was once is no longer. And hoping that it will go back to that is just wishful thinking. We have to let that go. We all now as leaders need to shift intentionally into what is, and then position ourselves for what can be. Because when we focus on what can be, when we focus on the future of work, that is where we will re-emerge from a position of strength, possibility, but also, you know, we hope a source of competitive advantage. So we're going to talk a little bit more now you've heard me say the saying, what was, what is, and what will be. I'm just going to kind of talk about those in a little bit more detail. But for business leaders across the globe, what we all have in common is that we are now experiencing this all together. We've obviously all learned locally from crises before, whether it was previous financial crisis, whether it was natural disasters, or indeed terrorist threats. You know, we've all had individual learnings, but actually what makes this unique now is the fact that globally we're all learning this together. And when I talk about what is no longer, what I mean by that is there's endless research on change management, and it really talks about that the sooner you can accept that what is changing and let go of what was, the quicker that you will be able to navigate yourselves, your teams and your organizations to what it is, and then ultimately what it will be. The challenge we have as leaders, letting go, that's hard. That's really hard. It elicits feelings of disorientation, low morale. It can make people feel incredibly uncomfortable, maybe feeling very unsettled, that their safety, you know, from a personal and a financial perspective is impacted. So we do need to acknowledge that. When we think about it, it does have a psychological impact. You know, I'd be very surprised if you yourselves, or certainly someone on your teams, would have not experienced the downside of all the uncertainty that we're facing. But equally, I'd be surprised if there haven't been moments of hope and joy when you think of the innovation, the new processes, the new relationships, the new strengths that you've seen in your teams. So we need to hold on to what still works from the past, because ultimately we'll all have mission statements, values that are absolutely still relevant to what is and what will be. But it's really important to work out which ones you're going to let go of and which ones, more importantly, you're going to take to the next phase of the future of work. So the quicker that you can address the challenges to what is, the quicker that you will realize what you now need and what you want the future of work to look like. And ultimately that will position your business in the best place of financial health. So turning to what will be, and I guess this is the exciting bit. This is where, you know, we get to become architects. This is where the entrepreneurial spirit will come in. But this is the most critical phase. This is where, as leaders, we have the opportunity to influence it. This is where we look at our human capital. We look at redefining our business models. We look at our technology and really think about, what do we want our organization to look like? You know, leaders, executives are so uniquely poised now, probably more so than they ever have been, to mold and shape and design what that's going to look like. So I guess, you know, we absolutely need to focus on what is and what will be, but we mustn't forget the founding principles on which our businesses were established and which ones we will take with us to the next phase. So I'm going to hand over to Steve now, who's going to specifically talk about what was, what is, and what will be in terms of process, people, and technology. He's going to give a lot of examples from Robert Half, and I'd just like to say it wouldn't be right for us to share the great innovations we've seen in some of our clients and candidates. So if it does feel like we're talking a lot about ourselves, I guess I'm kind of saying, please bear with us. There will, at the end, hopefully you will understand why. But without that, Steve, I'll pass over to you to do the next part of the webinar.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. That was brilliant so far. So pressure's on now. I think everyone on here today, and I think we've got a record number of attendees, which is absolutely fantastic. But I think everyone will agree that 7-8 weeks ago we took off on a journey. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know how we get there. The only thing that was absolutely certain was that we're not going to land where we took off. So I think that kind of proves that we haven't got all the answers, as Katie said today, but what we're going to aim to do is to take you on a bit of a journey through what was, what is, and what will be, and start to reimagine, utopia within what will be. But the one thing I would probably encourage everyone to do, and I've said this to a lot of my own team when it comes to them personally, but if you think of your business, what I'd really encourage you to do is an exercise, and it was something that our own MD, Matt Weston, was kind of had the foresight to do, was dig out your core values within your business. Dig out all of the work that you did on your culture pre-COVID, because all of those things that made you a fantastic business in the run-up to COVID are absolutely the things that you cling on to them that will get you through this, and also the things that will help you catch those first waves of recovery and get way ahead of your competitors. So if I look at Robert Half's own sort of lead principles, we call them, you'll see why with the first letter of each, they'll work through them, but leadership by example, ethics first, an openness to new ideas, and a dedication to excellence. I don't think there's anyone within Robert Half from the ground up that wouldn't agree with the fact that an adherence to those principles from the get-go throughout COVID of what's enabled us to kind of keep that spirit amongst us, and I suppose in terms of what we're all here for, enabled us to post some fantastic results in April as well, way beyond where we thought we'd be with all of this. So I just think that'd be a great exercise to encourage everyone, whether personally or within your wider businesses, to look at. If I move on to the next slide, what this next slide, you'd be pleased to know, by the way, that I'm not going to read out all of these questions. We actually undertook this exercise internally, and it's pretty overwhelming to answer all of these questions whilst tackling the ever-changing day-to-day. But what I will do, to Katie's point, is if there is a question where I've maybe seen something within Robert Half or within a client that will remain nameless, that might sort of add a bit of extra value, I'll comment. But this first slide is basically aimed at asking you whether you really have understood or understand the impact of COVID on your leadership style. I think the one thing that is definitely for certain, and it kind of goes without saying, that the only thing that's certain in the coming weeks and months is ambiguity and uncertainty. And if you've logged on to Katie's previous webinars around remote management and leading in uncertain times, one of the things that Katie has mentioned on numerous occasions is that as humans, we don't deal with ambiguity very well at all. So you'll hear this phrase a lot, but I think what you really do need to assess when it comes to answering these slides is how agile has your leadership style been? You know, where have you demonstrated leadership agility? I don't think, to Katie's point, that we ever would have achieved what we'd achieved if we hadn't taken an agile approach and sought the support of our own learning and development team to become more agile in a very, very short space of time. I think the agility within our leadership, not just my own, has led to kind of 4 very, very key things, and you could probably draw on these things yourselves as well. It definitely helped us build capacity and context within the organisation. It definitely brought a greater focus and urgency, with the emphasis on urgency. It created clarity to assess risk. And lastly, and probably most importantly, it allowed us for rapid decision making. And I think that is probably quite poignant and will sit well with everyone, that everyone has had to kind of be very, very precise and concise with how they've made decisions over the last couple of months. I'm actually going to coin a phrase. I believe it's his own. He claims it's his own as well. But Matt Weston, our UK MD, has said numerous times on numerous calls, you will not regret decisive action, but you will regret not being decisive enough. And I think that's kind of quite poignant when it comes to thinking how rapid your decision making has been. So have a flick through those questions in your own time. But essentially, I think they can be summarized by asking yourself one question, which is, are you exhibiting greater flexibility to your advantage in supporting responding to what is and reimagining what will be? So moving on to the next slide, and to Katie's point, the probably more exciting slide in terms of reimagining what will be. And I'm going to follow Katie's structure and follow Katie's structure of the previous webinars in terms of breaking down what might be from a people, a process, and a technology perspective. And again, I'm not going to answer all of these, but these are fantastic questions that have been very intentionally put together to test your businesses in these areas, to give you a flavour of what might need to be tweaked to create utopia in the future. But just picking on the question around culture, I think from a Robert Half perspective, we've definitely seen the emergence more than ever of collectivism. It's a buzzword that those of you who've listened to many other sort of business podcasts and webinars, it's kind of cropped up a lot lately. It was actually Katie that introduced me to that word. And collectivism is the principle of giving a group priority over the individual in it. There is absolutely no doubt that we wouldn't be where we are now, and we wouldn't have been able to lift and shift the best part of 20,000 bodies in an industry that loves face-to-face and loves being in the office to be at 90% fully operational within 5 working days, not to even mention the workforce management tools that were layered upon the remote technology if we weren't embracing collectivism. I think in a world at the minute where we're trying to grab on to small positives, no matter how small they are as well, I think what collectivism sort of brought were groups of individuals or individuals that work together to tackle the complexity of COVID that might never have worked together in the past and probably wouldn't have worked together in the future if it wasn't for COVID. So again, you know, COVID has been a horrendous sort of period of time to work through and will continue to be. But I think that's one lovely positive that I've enjoyed seeing over the last couple of months. I think just looking at the last couple of questions around people as well, probably talking a lot on this slide because I'm in the people business and I love people, but how will customer needs or how will your customer needs be different in the future? I haven't got the answer to that one for you, but I think from our perspective, because we've had so much more time on our hands to speak to clients around things and topics outside of hiring, which is clearly what we do, but we've been very appreciative of the fact that you know, hiring is maybe on the back burner temporarily. I think what Utopia looks like for our clients is using Robert Half and using our tenure and our experience within staffing to create a more permeable skill set based workforce where skill sets can be added in and taken out, bought permanently or borrowed, depending on where you are within a certain program of work or a change management or business transformation program. I mean, that's not something that's cropped up just because of COVID, but I think in this new remote style of working, it's probably become more and more prevalent. And that's what our clients have been asking us with help with over the last couple of months. And we'll hopefully help them with the journey on getting to Utopia over the coming months as well. Lastly, how is your customer experience going to change? Well, clearly for our customers and those customers that are on the call that love coming into our offices and speed dating our candidates back to back, love us coming to visit their office to pick up job descriptions and have detailed conversations. We've had to have a complete shift into a new virtual world, and I'm really pleased to kind of report that we've helped many clients, some of you that will be listening today, hire on a fully virtual end-to-end process where we've not only conducted the interview with our new video technology, but also helped to onboard and been involved in the technology elements within onboarding as well. So that's what we've seen from our clients. The feedback's been incredible to the point where even some of our trickiest clients that like to do things in a certain way have embraced it to a point where they've said, is there really any need to do big parts of the process face to face? Could we use this process even when we're back to work, which has been incredible to see. So just moving on to the process side of things. And again, we're talking about agility, but this is more around agility around your operating model. So how agile is your operational model been and how agile is it going to be in the future? I think for me personally, just putting something out there, maybe quite controversial, but I think I've realized over the last 7-8 weeks that the need to be in the office has been more of an emotional need for myself and other members of my team. We've all agreed on that, and I think Katie agreed the same as well. We are people, which is why we're in the game that we're in. But I think I'm considered sort of quite an energetic, positive person, but I've realised more than ever that energy and positivity comes from having people around me. So I think being in the office has made me realise it's more of an emotional need than an operational necessity. We've had amazing results, and I've always been a naysayer around remote work and working from home in the main. When it's come to the recruitment business, but I've been really pleasantly surprised with some of the results in black and white that changed my mindset forever, where we've actually seen productivity in certain individuals and certain teams increase. And when we've asked how has that happened, I think it's been sort of quite uplifting for them as well, in terms of this remote way of working has actually enabled them to balance life work even better. So I think in some way around sort of the agility of our operating model, I don't think for a second we're going to be knocking on our landlord's doors and running from the hills away from expensive rents. But it certainly made us think that a more blended approach to work with some remote and some in-office work could absolutely work, and will probably be how we look like when we get back, because it feels like it's going to be a phased approach to returning to offices. And yeah, as I said, it's been amazing to see productivity in some sort of areas increase as a result of this. And I think it's definitely made us think that we'll start to look at how we use our office space, maybe slightly differently in the future as well. So moving on to my last slide around technology. Technology has arguably been the biggest enabler to help us remain operational throughout COVID. Katie introduced me to another quote, that tech has probably moved from being our best friend to a family member. And I think that's absolutely the case. There's no way we would have got to where we are without embracing technology. I think it's safe to say, and I'll leave you sort of ponder and read these questions yourselves, but just to make a comment really, I think it's safe to say, and if Katie was on camera now, she'd giggle at this and sort of raise a smile, but Steve Sully and Katie Tanner are definitely not names that would roll off the tongue as being tech savvy within Robert Half. I mean, the pair of us tend to sort of help one another with our iPhones. But if you told us sort of 8 weeks ago that we'd be hosting 2 webinars a week to the best part of 200 people using Zoom technology, that we would both be involved in rolling out Microsoft Teams technology internally to host our meetings, we would be able to comfortably and articulately have conversations with clients around our loaner laptop technology together with Amazon Workspace to still deploy temps in a remote world. Not to mention that I've actually been nominated as a tech champion for the interview technology we've got for candidates and clients. I think Katie and I would have both said, you're crazy. But there's no doubt about it that COVID has accelerated our adoption of technology. It's changed the way that I'll look at technology forever. I'll leave my kind of dinosaur approaches to technology at the door and be less of, well, we've always done it this way, so why change it? So I think that's definitely changed for forever. Yeah, I just think when it comes to technology, I think we've absolutely sort of looked at things with a different lens, to use Katie's phrase. My last sort of comment around technology, and as I said, sort of Katie's 20 years and my own sort of 12 years within the business. We were fortunate, I suppose unfortunate, it felt at the time, but fortunate enough today to have worked through the last financial crisis, albeit a financial crisis. It led to a pretty deep and dark recession. We worked through that in recruitment with Robert Half. And I suppose my comment there would be, what we noticed, and we were discussing this internally, is that the businesses, our clients that bounced back the quickest after 9/11 and the financial crisis that followed, were the businesses that continued to invest in learning and development of their individuals. And the reason why I thought it did, or the reason why it did that, is that they came back into the recovery with a far more motivated workforce, a workforce that really valued that even when discretionary costs were being cut left, right and centre, that their personal development hadn't been cut. It also, as a result of that motivation and that sort of sense of belonging, meant that businesses were able to retain their best people. So with their best people on the pitch, it enabled them to catch the wave of recovery last time around quicker than their competitors and go on to move into that thriving phase, which is hopefully just around the corner for ourselves as well. So I would just encourage you on that, is that when you're looking at cost cutting, when you're looking at what technology projects can be put on hold, don't let it be learning and development. I think one of the big things that Robert Half have done is heavily invested and brought our e-learning platforms, not just to our candidates, but to our employees, back to the forefront. And I think that, to my point, will be what makes us come out of this stronger at the other end. So just a comment there around technology and some sort of thoughts to take away. But I'd encourage you to answer those questions in your own time around your own technology platforms. So with that, no, thank you for listening. Thank you, Katie, for letting me get a bit more involved today. And I'll hand back to you to invite any questions that we've maybe received during the webinar, and let you wrap this one up for a change. But back to you, Katie.
So I guess as we draw the webinar to a close, I guess as all businesses across the world really consider what the future will look like, what their new normal will look like, it's pretty obvious it's going to take resolve, resilience, reimagination and reform. And you know, there's another McKinsey article that I read only this week, a new one called Surviving to Thriving, and it basically urges everyone to not lose this moment in time. Don't lose this moment to reimagine your business. Don't you lose this time to reimagine your people, your processes, your technology. Do it now. So when you come out of this, when you rebound, you are quick to rebound, and hopefully that will allow your businesses to return to full speed. And it's those that do that, or certainly those that have done that in the past from previous recessions or previous challenging times, that have really come out far more ready to confront the challenges and also the opportunities that could be in their new world. So we would encourage everyone to have a very brisk cadence to business agility, accountability, and flexibility. Keep that purpose-driven customer playbook. That's so important. When you think back to what made your business, the founding values, when you think about your culture, and keep that sense of possibility that we've already seen in so many companies, because they're the ones, as we said, that are going to emerge from a position of strength and have that competitive advantage. And I guess what we're saying in essence is leaders need to decide who they are, how they're going to work, and then ultimately how they're going to grow. And, you know, we're all architects now in aiding in the rebuilding of our businesses in this new world. So thank you again for joining today. We hope some of the perspectives, there's a takeaway for everyone on the call. And we wish you all the best, to you, your teams, your loved ones. And with that, I think we'll see if there are any questions that people would like to ask. And Matt, I'll hand over to you to see if there are any questions indeed that have come through.
Yeah, Katie, there's been a couple of questions. First of all, just bear with me on this one. So with the high likelihood of continued remote or agile working in the future, what do your insights tell you about how different sectors now changed business priorities, include investment in not just digital, but also cultural transformation?
Okay. So I would say, you know, the culture, you know, a culture of integrity, a corporate culture that is based on your company's values, you know, to Steve's point, needs to remain and needs to stay at the forefront of what we do. I think the way that we can make sure that the culture is still a number one priority, I think everyone would have done in the last 2 or 3 years, quite a lot of work around their culture. I know we certainly have, and make sure that we still have a very inclusive, diverse workforce, is keeping that learning and development, keeping people, their well-being, their needs at the forefront. And when you're looking at saving costs, when you're looking at what you want your team to look like, looking at the people first, because you can't have process and you can't have technology without people, as we know. So just what I've read would just say keep the people, you know, forefront and center of that, and that should hopefully protect the culture as much as all of the things that we need to protect right now as a duty of care to our businesses.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add to this, and this is plagiarising you, Katie, but I think cultural transformation will centre around, you know, it's probably easier. It's still a challenge, but it's easier to make people feel safe, make people feel like they matter, and make people feel like they belong in an office environment. How that's going to look in a more remote world is going to be a challenge. But if you think of those three things, and Katie spoke about it in previous webinars around remote management. So I think it's Emily that's asked this question. If you weren't on that one, we can send you the deck. But I think asking yourself those questions around how you can, in a remote world, help people feel safe, matter, and belong as much as they did when they were working in an office, that'll probably put you on a great start within cultural transformation.
Thanks, Steve. And then the final question is more around the reference to the articles, Katie. You've referenced McKinsey a couple of times throughout this. And I just wanted to point out that we can share a link to that article when we send follow-up information post this webinar.
So there's two great ones. The first one is the 5 phases of recovery, which is the one that I've referred to the most. And then there was a great one that only came out, I believe, earlier in the week, which talks about going from surviving to thriving. They're probably about 6 or 7 pages long. They're not War and Peace like some of their papers can be. So I would, yeah, they're great. So hopefully they can be some homework for everyone. But if no one's got any more questions,
there
please...
is one more. Sorry, Katie. Sorry to interrupt you. There is one more just come in. Apologies. How can a new recruit help an organisation reimagine what will be? What key skills should be looked for in that new recruit, do we think?
Great question. So how can a new recruit help an organisation reimagine what will be and what skills? So I think where new recruits will really add an advantage is they will add ideas around possibility. They won't be always focusing on what was. So I think it's almost like they're coming in with their eyes wide open. So I think that ability to take that wider perspective, looking right, left, and in front. So for me, I think that that would be the most exciting bit. What he should be looked for, I think it depends what obviously the new recruit role is going to be. But if it was a new leader, which is obviously what we're talking about today, I would be looking for agility, flexibility, change, project management skills. I would be looking for people that have got resilience and grit, because I think a leader's ability to deal with uncertainty now is going to become a #1 priority for sure.
Thanks, Katie. That's all questions answered.
Great. So guys, for anyone who does want to ask a question, please feel free to reach out to your local Robert Half consultant. I know they'd only be more than happy to help. But with that, thank you, Steve. It's been fun co-hosting with you today. It's been different.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone.
I was just going to say before we go, just because we've got record numbers still on and tuned in, what's next week's webinar?
So next week's webinar is called Working Families Making It Work for All. So we are going to be really talking again about our own experiences. I'm a working parent myself of 3 children, and we're going to be looking at research too, really just kind of exploring again some ways that we feel that we can try and make it work for everyone in the family. So it will be great to hopefully see some familiar names. But a very different feel next week, but as the children are obviously not back at school, I think it's going to become an increasingly more important subject for us to explore for sure.
Brilliant, great stuff. Thanks, Katie. And I know that one is kind of close to your heart. So no, thank you, Katie, once again. Brilliant delivery, brilliant content, and thanks to everyone who tuned in, and we'll see you again next week.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, bye.